Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Party at the End of the World. Today, you have in your presence me, Lex, Ben, and a new third for today, and this is Jen. Say hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Glad to be back.
Jen, do you have anything you'd like to tell everybody about yourself?
I'm just a disabled poet from Oklahoma City, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm really happy to have you here, sweetie. If you've been listening a while, you know Ben. You know him a little bit.
I'll introduce myself
Go
again.
ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
my name is Ben. I have a history degree, and I've worked as a paralegal for a long time, over a decade. And I worked on some pretty large cases. I enjoy writing, video games, all that fun stuff. And I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. All right. So we are recording this on July 14th. I have to say that now. It will not come out until Sunday. And the news that we are talking about now will probably be old news by then. But it does stand to point out that in America right now, as of July 14th, 2026, it looks like Taco Bell is our CDC, Waffle House is our weather alert system, and yeah. Lindsey Graham is dead and Mitch McConnell's probably dead. So there we go.
And so Sam Neill. Man, that was sad.
Yeah.
I'm always sad about Sam Neill.
Yeah. I saw a really interesting post on Threads the other day that was discussing how the theme of the movie, that life will find a way, literally plays out in his character as a man who starts out as a guy who just doesn't like kids, doesn't want to be around kids, just is very apprehensive about the whole thing. And by the end of it, he still doesn't think he wants kids, but he definitely figures out how to deal with everything. And it's just really cool to see that parallel drawn in the movie. That would be Jurassic Park. The movie would be Jurassic Park.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Hunt for Red Hot October. My bad.
So how did we feel? I was not up the night on Threads that Lindsey Graham died. I woke up to a lot of posts. How did we feel when we got the news, everybody?
I was really surprised. So I didn't expect to hear that. It honestly shocked me quite a bit. He seemed to be in good shape. He gets lots of exercise with those people that visit him in those little motel rooms. Like, I thought he was going to be around. And evil typically seems to live until they're 98 anyway. So, yeah.
Yep. I was surprised, but in a way I wasn't. I'm really surprised by the fact that they nominated his sister to take his spot without an election. That was kind of surprising.
I honestly, like, Threads was pretty awesome. Everybody was celebrating and throwing a party. I still think Mitch McConnell is in a Weekend at Bernie situation. While he stole my idea for my own funeral, I am a little irritated that the Lindsey Graham thing is trying to take over the news about Mitch McConnell. I believe it's definitely like a sort of distraction because honestly, I think Mitch is gone. I just think they're trying to keep that seat with Mitch's name on it.
I think they're trying to keep any seat with a Republican name on it because they know what's coming.
Probably.
Yeah, and there's some interesting conspiracy theories. Maybe we'll save that for conspiracy theory night. But Lindsey Graham, his death is just odd timing.
Very odd timing.
I concur wholeheartedly. The timing is very interesting if you think about where he was, what he was saying, and the time frame. Just interesting stuff. Really interesting.
There's a lot more talk recently about the American military joining with the IDF too, and that's something.
That's very concerning.
Yeah, typically when you have a situation like that, you have one country's culture overrule another country's culture, which fill in the blank there as far as what that would mean for America's military culture.
We're already seeing the impacts of it. The IDF is training ICE. They're training a lot of our police forces. Atlanta, there was just a big story recently that cop city in Atlanta, it's all IDF training those cops. And if you look at how Israeli defense forces respond to people in Israel and Palestine, they just shoot them. Like, we're going to start seeing that a lot more because that is effectively what they are being trained to do.
I completely believe that. And I know that where I live, there's some training facilities here that people have protested. But I feel like, honestly, I feel like people are not angry enough. And unfortunately, I'm screaming into the void where I live. So you guys probably know how that goes where you guys are located.
Yep, unfortunately, I do. I live in Indianapolis, where the city of Indianapolis itself is pretty like purple. I would even venture to say it's leaning more liberal, but everything around it is MAGA, 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 MAGA.
Yep.
And the state is so gerrymandered that they don't want any of the Democratic votes to count at all. It's kind of funny, actually, because Republicans have had a supermajority here for 32 years. We have not had power to do anything, and they still find a way to blame us.
Same here. I mean, Oklahoma's pretty much, I would say, on par with Indiana as far as a lot of stuff goes. Actually, I feel like we almost live in the same state practically.
Yeah, I think a lot of Republican voters, it's all fear mongering that they get caught in, and they are stuck in this information bubble where they'll believe the craziest stuff that's just wrong, And at a certain point, in their mind, they're voting for good things. And even when they do vote for stuff that is good, like they could vote for ending puppy mills or something like that, the legislation can overrule those kinds of statewide votes. So it's really frustrating to be in a Midwestern state for sure.
For a number of different reasons.
That is correct. Keep thinking that things are going to get better here, but people are like, oh, go vote blue, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, I hate to break it to you, but simply voting is not going to fix what's broken. Anyway.
Yep, I know. I know. It's unfortunately, if you look at history, I'm not advocating for any of this. So before you think that I am, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is if you look at history, whenever governments get to a certain point of power and control with authoritarianism and fascism, you have to extricate them because they will not give up power on their own, historically.
Yep.
And Ben and I had a whole conversation in the first episode about how dictatorships that are not as hardline are the ones that get overthrown. So, like, you look at somebody like Kim Jong Un, they keep power because they do things like execute his uncle with an air rifle cannon or something or whatever it was. It was some ridiculous overkill thing in a public execution. Like, they do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like with abandon.
Yeah, that's a good episode. People should check it out.
They really should. As you know, we are playing a little bit with our format here. And today, those of you who may not know, I have been a crime journalist for a couple of decades. I have 25 years of case files prepped and ready to go from things that I've covered over the years. And I kind of have a rule with myself. I really love talking about true crime, but I do it a little bit differently than other people do. And I like to focus on the victims. I like to focus on the patterns of the crimes. I like to bring up crimes that have something pertinent that we can learn from them about the situation that we're in, not just to bring it up for like titillation. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to be talking about somebody's unfortunate, brutal murder, there's going to be a reason for it. There's going to be a couple of different lessons we can all learn from it. And what we're not going to do is talk about killers, murderers, serial killers, people like that, like they are celebrities. We are going to talk about the people that matter in this situation, which are the victims.
I'm totally fine with that.
Wonderful. This is where I need to put up a trigger warning for anybody listening to this episode. The case that we are going to cover involves sexual abuse. It involves systematic unaliving of people by groups of people. There is torture involved, and there is mention of white supremacist ideas and neo-Nazi cult behavior. So if this is not something that you feel like you can handle listening to right now, Totally understand. We have a few more episodes, that you can go back and listen to that don't have this subject matter. But before we start talking about the case, I wanted to get that out, like, on the table right away. Like, this is the subject matter of the case that we're dealing with. If you can't handle that right now, come back and maybe listen another time, or just skip this one. It's okay. But that's, you get to make that choice for you. I'm not going to just subject you to it and then you find out later when you're halfway through it.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely no problem. I myself am a PTSD patient, and I like to be able to make decisions about the stimuli that I am able to handle. And I assume that everybody else does as well. The case that we're going to be talking about is an Australian case, and it's from the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. It's one of the most famous cases to ever happen in Australia. It is a very complicated case. It is a case where there's not just one bad guy. There's several bad guys, and they're bad for different reasons. And even the bad guys, when you look at the layers of all of this, have reasons to talk about. I don't like the term brainwashing because I think that it kind of oversimplifies what it is. But those coercive control dynamics that happen in a lot of intense religious situations, or like corporate cults where everybody follows the boss, or there's a very much leader follower, up the ante, prove yourself to stay connected kind of a dynamic going on here with these men. And the leader of the group of people is somebody who was highly manipulative, who had kind of been on this stuff for a really long time, and the warning signs were there, but he was a normal enough guy that most people just let it ride. It was during a time where outside of America, there wasn't really this hyper awareness of behavior, because by that point, America had been going through serial killer after serial killer after serial killer for 2 decades. So there was a lot more awareness of the fact that you don't just find random bodies places, especially not bodies in this condition. There was just a lot more awareness at the time that this happened, but I don't know if that awareness was as strong outside of America. And a lot of the reason why this went on so long is because of the victims that he targeted. We're going to talk right off the cuff at the beginning about victimology. Anybody who watches true crime, has studied true crime, has read books about true crime, has heard the term victimology. Victimology is when you're looking at any kind of a crime, especially a murder. You look at who the victim was, the way they lived their life. You find out as much information about the victim as you possibly can, because everything that happened to that victim is going to be very pertinent in telling you something about the person that committed that crime. For example, Ted Bundy had a very specific type. He targeted young women between under the age of 25 with long brown hair. They all kind of looked like his ex-girlfriend. They all kind of had similar career paths in mind. They were all kind of normal suburban girls who were maybe away from home for being in college the first time. Those consistencies tell you an awful lot about the person committing the crime. So the case that we're going to be talking about today is kind of colloquially known as the Snowtown murders. It's also known as the bodies in barrels murders. That should tell you right off the bat a little bit about what we're dealing with. Okay. They were a series of murders committed by a group of 5 people were convicted, but it's estimated that there was quite a bit more involved in it. And the murder spree is estimated to have gone from August of 1992 to about May of 1999. And it was in and around Adelaide in South Australia. There is one person who was convicted of helping dispose of the bodies. It still remains to be seen if he had more to do with things than he was actually convicted for. Everybody in the end of this case turned on each other and tried to say that everybody was doing it but them. in cases where you have a group of people doing stuff, they will often, at the end of the line, try and blame everybody else for what happened and say, I didn't do any of that. And there's genuinely only one person in this case, and that is the one person whose name I'm going to mention before anybody else, because I will eventually give names for all of these suspects and all of these people. But like I said, we focus on the victims, we focus on the patterns, and then we talk about who they were. But there is one of the suspects that I will give a name probably before the other ones, because he occupies this space that you see a lot in cases where it's like a group dynamic or a dynamic where you have two killers and one of them is dominant and the other one is submissive, where he already comes from an extreme abuse background. He was extremely young, like we're talking under the age of 20 when he was put in a position to be participating in all of this. So he didn't have a fully developed brain, and he was following what the guy who was supposed to be his stepfather was telling him to do. So there's some really interesting dynamics to talk about there. We'll get there when I start explaining more about the case. They were apprehended May 21st of 1999. The crime was discovered a little bit before that. It took them a while to figure out who they were looking for. It's estimated that they had about 12 victims, but if you look at what they were doing and how this escalated, I feel comfortable saying that there's probably quite a bit more than 12 victims. That's just the ones that they found in the barrels. But there is significant evidence that they had used a different dump site before, used different body disposal methods before, and that they just never found all of that evidence in a way that they could present it and even identify who they were at the time. Most of the bodies were found in barrels full of acid in an abandoned bank vault in Snowtown, South Australia. The town of Snowtown is an old mining town. I would equate it with, like, population wise and culture wise, it's a lot like a lot of these old West Virginia mining towns, if that gives you any sort of an idea of what to correlate it with in your mind. They called it the Snowtown murders because it was this tiny South Australian former mining town that was deindustrialized and the population had dropped. And we all know what happens in small towns when the jobs disappear, right? That's the situation that Snowtown was in. But only one of the victims was actually killed in Snowtown. Most of them were just dumped there. And they would come to get rid of the bodies there from as far away as like 87 miles or 140 kilometers north. So they were very strategic about the fact that they were not putting the bodies anywhere that they lived. That's what's called a forensic countermeasure. When you're dealing with an unknown subject or an unsub, which is what we call the perpetrator before we know who they are, when you're dealing with an unknown subject that is already planning to that degree, you have to think that they're planning other things. Like, it only makes sense that if they're taking the forensic countermeasure to dump in an area where they're not even living, they're thinking about it at least. But none of the 12 victims, nor the the three main perpetrators, there were 5 in total, were from that town. Like, they just picked the town to dump it in. And it was, and again, uniquely, these these barrels were filled with acid and stored in an abandoned bank vault that they had keys to.
I have so many questions.
Oh, I'm sure I will answer some of them as I go through this. I'm going to give you the best overview of the case as I possibly can, and then we'll talk. The motivation for all of the murders is unclear because he gave a different reason for each person. But the killers were led by one man to believe that the victims were pedophiles, homosexual, or quote unquote weak, and that they were. And another thing that bears repeating is that the leader of this cult had very open neo-Nazi sensibilities. He was very much a white power kind of guy, and all of his victims were white. And when he says weak, he's talking about people who, like, are the wrong kind of white, or they're gay, or he thinks they're gay, and because they're gay, they're pedophile. Like, it's that line of thinking. in the end, the motivation also seems to have been money, because these people kept benefits checks coming for 6 to 12 months in a lot of cases, and they would cash them as if the person were still alive. Like, there was a lot of financial fraud going on as well. In several cases, some of the victims, the murders were preceded by torture, and efforts were made to appropriate the victims' identities, their social security payments, their bank accounts. Like, it was, they were killing people for money, as well as, other inappropriate beliefs. Kind of initially, the notoriety of the murders led to a short-term economic boost from people visiting Snowtown because they wanted to see where it happened, and it created a lot of stigma. And authorities have considered changing the town's name and the identity, just because this case has been one of the biggest international cases over the years. The case has been chronicled in numerous books, as well as there was a film adaptation released in 2011. But we are talking about, like, murder after murder after murder, usually preceded by torture for very trumped up things. Like, a lot of these guys may have been gay. They weren't out, they weren't open, but the leader of this group, and I'll go ahead and give names here now, since I've, kind of gone over a lot of the finer points of just how we got from point A to point B. The suspects in this case are named John Bunting. John Bunting is the ringleader, the mastermind. He is the guy calling all the shots. Okay. You have Robert Wagner and then Jamie Velasquez. Jamie Velasquez is the stepson of John Bunting. His mother knew that he was being sexually abused by her former partner and multiple other people. By the time that John came into his life, he was a 14-year-old heroin addict who was dealing with a crap ton of untreated trauma and really needed an adult in his life to show up for him. And John did that. John just did that, and also filled his brain with a lot of really, really inappropriate philosophy and, ways of doing things. Because when the only guy that shows up for you and doesn't hurt you is a neo-Nazi, you kind of understand what happens after that. Mark Hayden was arrested, and he's the one that he was convicted of helping them to dispose of the bodies. And the other perpetrator that I can think that I even though she ended up being a murder victim, the other perpetrator that I consider is Jamie Velasquez's mother herself, because she at some point knew that John Bunting was getting all of this disability money, all of this extra social security money. She never asked where it came from. She helped him beat the ever living shit out of a guy one time. Like, and when I say beat, I mean, like, they knew they were beating him within an inch of his life. She didn't ask questions. She didn't do anything. She just started participating. She did whatever he told her to do. So those are the dynamics that we're looking at here. We are effectively looking at a white supremacist, homophobic death cult, which I don't know about you, but if you know anything about cult dynamics and you can look around America right now, there are some lessons that can be learned from this whole thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask if when you said that, I'm like, wait, are we dealing with MAGA?
I mean, you would be hard pressed not to see it, especially if you look at what's going on in Mississippi right now.
I mean, it's a cult. It's essentially across the board. That's what the United States is. That's what, hell, look at Mississippi, but look at Maine. Look at what happened with the
Yep.
person that gunned down today. People are already in the streets, taken to the streets about it. And I'm not into politics, but I pay attention to politics because I'm of the mindset that if you say I don't do politics, well, eventually they will do you, you know? And so I pay attention
Yep.
to as much as I can, but people don't want to believe it. But we're in a civil war in this country, and we're going to find out that that's what it is 20 years from now. That's what the history books are going to say was going on at this in this time frame, and it's just a wild time to be alive.
Yeah, it's just because it's cold doesn't mean the conflict isn't there.
Yeah.
there's a lot of parallels to what's going on in the United States right now, and that's the reason that I picked this case, because I think that there are a lot of things that we can learn about power and control dynamics. Like, how does one guy in his 30s convince 5 people to help him murder people and not talk about it? Like, that bears questioning. In this case, several individuals are directly involved in the murders. That would be John Bunting, Wagner, and Mark Hayden, and were all charged with killings. And additionally, Jamie Velasquez, the kid, pleaded guilty to 4 murders and provided testimony in exchange for a lesser sentence. He's the one that they ended up being able to flip. And most of what we know, like for certain about this case, came from things that he told officers and that checked out. There were several other persons who had acted as accomplices in the murders and the disposal of the body, but were never charged. John Jason Bunting was born in 1966, and he was found to be the leader of the perpetrators when he was 8 years old. But Bunting himself was beaten and sexually assaulted by a friend's older brother, and he, after that, is reported to have really enjoyed weaponry, photography, and anatomy. He grew to develop a strong hatred of pedophiles and homosexuals, and at 22, he worked like at an abattoir, and like, which is like an animal slaughterhouse, and he bragged about killing the animals because that's what he enjoyed the most. That should tell you quite a bit about the kind of person that we're dealing with, somebody who enjoys killing defenseless things and brags about it. Probably not probably not the most like put together person on the planet, right? Normal people do not enjoy murdering things. Like, even if you have to kill something to eat it, that's not usually people's favorite part of things. You know what I mean?
Should have seen my face through you explaining this just now. I was just, yeah, that was, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
whew.
Sounds like a.
Yep.
I can see why they made a film off it. Sounds like a film character. Just that evilness that you can feel it seeping through the words you say.
One of the biggest red flags for this kind of behavior is, and this kind of behavior can come from like one of two things, right? If you have a teenager, especially a male teenager who hurts animals, who enjoys hurting animals, you probably have a bigger red flag than you realize, because what that tells people is that this is somebody who enjoys exerting the most oppressive kind of power over something that cannot fight back. And it generally stands to reason that at a certain point, if you will go that far and do it to a defenseless animal for enjoyment, there's a very strong correlation to that behavior escalating to hurting particularly women and children, but a lot of times it's just humans. But a lot of these guys do hurt women and children because they see us to be more defenseless. They like it when we can't fight back.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
John Bunting moved to a house in Salisbury North in 1991 and befriended his neighbors, Mark Hayden and Robert Wagner. Robert Wagner was born in 1971, and he was befriended by John Bunting in 1991. Bunting encouraged Wagner to assist in the various murders. Like Bunting, Wagner was formerly active in several neo-Nazi groups. That's another indicator of things, maybe not being entirely good. Nobody and it's not just the fact that it's like neo-Nazi things, it's anybody who falls into a rigid system of belief like that. It happens with religious cults, it happens with political cults, it happens with neo-Nazi cults. It's not necessarily what you believe, it's the fact that just the fact that you are susceptible enough to fall into a very high control situation like that. Once you have crossed that line and you're willing to do whatever the leader says, and because not everybody who gets involved in those situations is, but once you get to the point where you're willing to do whatever the leader says, that's a huge red flag.
Do you feel like the people get targeted who are just, it's like how we see like with MAGA and stuff like that. It's like the undereducated people tend to lean more towards those types of things in a lot of instances. That's not always the case, but
Oh,
often is the
no,
case.
they target the people that they know are the most vulnerable to that kind of a thing. And usually people, and it doesn't matter your education level, it doesn't matter anything. Anybody is susceptible to this kind of shit if the right circumstances are present in your life. And those circumstances are usually extreme, like tumultuous relationships with family and friends, so you can't really find community where you're at. Financial desperation is a huge reason why people fall into these power and control dynamics, because when you have nothing and nobody will listen to you and nobody checks up on you, you become very vulnerable for human connection, and you become very vulnerable to anybody who says that they can help you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they just need a hug. Okay, they need more than that. But you're right. People get stuck in their own bubble of not just information, but self hatred. And some people, they use that as they just snap and they start to blame the other. We talked about it a lot before, but it's
It always bears repeating.
exactly it repeats in any like community, whether it's these people in MAGA, the Confederacy, Yahtzee Germany.
Do you know why it's so effective, though?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with we're just hardwired and it's psychology.
Yes, you are correct. We are hardwired for community, and they are playing with that psychological underpinning. But it is so effective because, especially in the West, we are very openly propagandized, but we are also told that we are individuals and we are smart and we would never fall for any of that stuff. It becomes a very sunk cost fallacy for a lot of these people. They get involved in this situation, and it would like by the time that they're all the way in to whatever it is, it would completely upend and ruin their entire life if they were to say, you know what, I was really wrong about this.
Oh yeah, that makes me think of like some of these trad wives that they get trapped when they're, 16 or 17 or 18, and then by the time they're like 45, the husbands leave them for somebody younger and stuff like that. And they have absolutely no sense of themselves. They have no checking account. They don't have their own house. They don't have anything. And they're left with literally as a shell of a person because all they did was invest everything into being a trad wife and being a mother and not having any personality or anything to fall back on. And that seems pretty similar to
Yep.
what happens with these folks. And, I've been friends with a few people that grew up in, that shiny, happy people cult. They used to have a huge headquarters in Oklahoma City until probably like 12 years ago or something like that. It's been a while, but I had some friends that actually grew up in that cult. They didn't get past an eighth grade education, and that where they were trapped in like basically living in a bus, and there's like 12 kids, and the oldest one was responsible for the younger ones. And it's the same thing, white supremacy. It's all across the board with Abrahamic religion. It's just all such a sick to me. Anyway, sorry.
You don't need to apologize at all.
I
Like,
go on
you are
tangents.
right on the money. You are right on the money. And that's the reason why I picked this case, because there are a lot of these dynamics that you can look at and openly see how they can affect other aspects, and you can see the parallels of how they affect things here.
Yeah.
And this is a very extreme example of those dynamics. Not everybody's going out and just murdering people, but a lot of them want to.
That's
Yeah.
why ICE gets so many volunteers.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, they're not out doing serial murder because they're torturing people in the streets legally, so they don't have to hide it anymore. And same thing with cops, same thing with the IDF training police. It's all the same thing.
Yep. And I'm very glad that you see that and are pointing it out, because that was exactly my thought process here.
Yay.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Jamie Velasquez now. Jamie is a very interesting part of this case. He now has a different name. He is living in the Australian prison system. He is, like, I have interviewed at this point in my career 16 different serial murderers on 4 different continents. He's one of the ones that I have talked to. I will not give out his new name, nor will I give out any identifying information for him, because his life has completely changed since he has been incarcerated in like a very good way. But this will always be something that he has to live with for the rest of his life. This is Jamie Velasquez. He was born in 1979 along with his mother and his half brother. He lived with John Bunting and was gradually drawn into helping with the murders. This was not something he wanted to do at all from the beginning. Velasquez, at 19, helped torture and kill his own half brother, Troy Yude, and his stepbrother, David Johnson. His confession in 2001 to 4 murders, including Jason's, allowed him to become a key witness for the Crown in the trial. And the detail that he provided, supported by other evidence, was ultimately what helped convict Bunting and Wagner. He was sentenced in 2002 to a minimum of 26 years and was held in isolation in it for like a long time when he first got in there. And isolation in an Australian prison is a little bit different than solitary confinement here. They have different protocol for it. It's a much more humane process there, but still the idea of what they're doing is the same thing. And in early August of 2025, it was announced that Velasquez would be granted parole, but the decision was overturned due to outrage and subsequent review. But he did earn his parole. Elizabeth Harvey is the woman that I mentioned. She is Jamie Velasquez's mother. She knew about the murders and, with Bunting's encouragement, assisted in one of them. After Bunting, Wagner, and her son, Jamie, and Mark Hayden were taken into custody, she died of cancer, and that's the main reason why she was not arrested and convicted with them. Mark Hayden is the one that just got parole, and he was an associate of John Bunting's. These guys were all neighbors, okay, in this small Australian town. And he was initially the subject of suppression orders or statutory provisions prohibiting publication, meaning he could not be identified as anything other than an alleged perpetrator. In January 1999, he was the one that rented the bank vault in Snowtown. He's the one that had the keys. During the trial, a jury deadlocked on the murders of his wife and Troy Yude. They couldn't tell if he had participated in the murders or not, but Jamie has always maintained that he was right there along with them. He pleaded guilty to helping the killers dispose of the bodies of Elizabeth and Troy Yude, though. And Hayden was released from prison in May of 2024. And then we have Jordy Elliott, and she's the sister of Elizabeth. And she was a woman who had like developmental delays and developmental disabilities, and she had a crush on John Bunting. But to receive her Social Security income, she pretended to be Suzanne Allen, a deceased former acquaintance of Bunting, so she helped with the fraud. But again, she was severely developmentally delayed, and he had kind of control in that situation because he knew she had feelings for him. Suzanne Allen, who was a deceased former acquaintance of John Bunting's, and Frederick Brooks, Elliot's son, was later killed by the group. So they murdered her son for her trouble.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yep. Are we noticing some patterns here so far?
Oh yeah.
What are we noticing?
Honestly, it's just honestly for me, it's like coming from the background that I come from. I could see the mom clear as day being largely part of the problem, and I'm sure that, based on the information that I have from you, the mother sounds like she basically was just selling her kids off for whatever, just to
Yep.
have a man in her life, and did
Very
not,
male-centered.
yeah,
Very
didn't
male-centered.
give a damn like what happened to her child or children, and was fine with whatever happened, and didn't expect to have any consequences. And obviously her only consequence was getting cancer. But this poor kid just did not have a chance in hell. I mean,
Nope.
really, honestly, considering he just, like, out of the gate, his mother was already just handing him over to whoever would, groom him in that regard. So it's just really upsetting, but it's just like I can see her clear as day what kind of person that she is. Just like she's just fucking terrible.
Yep. Unfortunately, it's something we see a lot in cases like this. Everybody asks, didn't the mother know? What did the mother do? The mother was part of it. Like, people do not immediately think that women can be part of something so heinous and something so grotesque, but oftentimes we are. Whether we're directly involved in the murders and the disposal, or whether we're just looking the other way and not doing anything about it, we're involved.
I'm so glad that the glass ceiling is finally being broken on women's sociopaths. Nice job.
Oh my God. We got to start somewhere, okay? We got to start somewhere.
Well, North Korea next leader will probably be a woman, and that is the highest office a woman sociopath can get to.
I mean, I wish her luck, I guess. I don't know what to say.
You are not wrong. I don't know if that's something we should be celebrating. I'm glad you're being sarcastic, but yeah.
Yeah, I just don't know what to say at that, because like I just I know that I don't know what to say. My brain hurts, that's all.
Okay. So the victims were chosen by John Bunting, only ever by John Bunting, and oftentimes for very imagined infractions. Like, some of them were murdered because he suspected them of being pedophiles, but it was based on like evidence that they had a boyfriend, or evidence that like they weren't married to a woman and they kept to themselves, so they must be gay, so therefore they must be a pedophile. But a lot of these people that he targeted were like drifters. He killed people because he disliked obese people.
Jesus.
He disliked drug users, or because he thought they were homosexual. Most of his victims were friends or acquaintances of at least one member of the group. So he would like get to know who their friends and family were and then turn them against those people so that he could torture, murder, and steal their benefits money.
Wow.
A lot of them were family members, occasionally sharing a residence with one of the murderers. Some of them were only befriended for a short time before being pulled into the group as easy targets. Those were the drifters. Those were the ones that like didn't have any. Those were the ones that were found in the barrels that like had no connection. And when you think about bodies being stored in barrels in acid, I'm sure you're thinking of like one body per barrel. But no, he packed these things full. There were 1.5 to 2 bodies in each barrel, and they were mixed up. So you can imagine what he had to do to get them into the barrels. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh God. Uh, oh my God.
Yeah. Kevin Howells, a forensic psychiatrist at Broadmoor Hospital in the United Kingdom, believed that his behavior suggested that he lacked emotion and the capacity to empathize with his victims. Duh. But it showed that he was very controlling. He derived a lot of satisfaction from controlling his victims and from controlling the people that he worked with. Bunting's victims were forced to call him God, Master, Chief Inspector, and Lord Sir during the torture. During the murders, he had fashioned a rock spider wall on the wall of a spare room in his house. The chart was created using paper notes and yarn, you know the type, and it was an interconnected web of names of people Bunting alone suspected to be pedophiles or homosexuals. And he would select a name from the wall and then call and threaten the person. The victim's social security and bank details were often obtained through the murders and so through the torture part of the whole thing, so that the murderers and their associates could impersonate the victims after their death and continue to collect their pensions or welfare. A total of about 97,200 Australian dollars was collected this way. It is not believed that Social Security fraud was the main motive for the murders. It was just a nice benefit. And the final murder of David Johnson was conducted in the Snowtown Bank building after the barrels, which contained the majority of the victims' remains, had already been moved there for storage.
So I have something to say real quick.
Go for it.
Starting to see parallels with what they were doing with their fraud stuff and how the government here is trying to rip poor people off pretty much constantly.
Yep.
And it's just like, wow, we are in a cult in this country and we are just in a death cult. Like, ultimately, that's what's happening because it's so calculated when I don't know what happened as far as like what they claimed, if they claimed insanity or whatnot, but this is so cold and calculated that it's just like Project 2025 essentially. They're taking people that they consider othered. Same thing with like Salem witch trials, for instance. That was a land grab kind of situation. That was like, you're autistic woman, I don't like you, and you have some land that I want. You're a witch because you came to me in my dreams. Well, it's kind of similar, just different time frames. Like, at least maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it just sounds like to
Nope.
me. It's
There's
echoing
a
so many different aspects of history
yep.
that have happened, and what's happening now. And so it's just like it just kind of clicked in my brain that like that's exactly what we're dealing with right now with all the quote unquote social security fraud and everything else, when like legitimately every poor person I know that is on any sort of disability is living below poverty level and are not committing any sort of fraud, yet people are convinced that they are because some other guy said, well, these people are committing fraud, when they're the ones. It's all projection essentially. It's all projection essentially. While they're over here committing the crimes, they're throwing up stuff to keep other people busy so they don't pay attention to what's going on. So I'll shut up now.
No, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. There is a reason I chose this case to open the true crime parts with. There is a lot of parallels and a lot of parallels in the behavior and how he was able to convince all of these people to effectively murder for him with no evidence.
Yeah, and that's what's happening now too, right? So
Yep.
I think it also shows what can happen in the future. So things are bad in America, but things can be a lot worse in America. And unless we really take back our country peacefully, then we are going to start facing situations where one person will have the power of the entire economy in a few years as AI just starts replacing so many jobs. Whichever AI CEO that is going to have, even if they have good thoughts in mind, they're going to have the power to be a dictator, and it's going to be hard for us to maintain our rights, and that's something that we need to keep in mind as AI is able to start influence people more than we even have. I mean, we think Fox News is bad for how it lies to people, and I can say that because they've admitted that in court that they're not a news channel. So whether it's that or it's going to get worse with AI, I think this is something to keep in mind. We're going to see the potential of a lot more of these people in the future.
Yep. So it would behoove us to examine a case that happened in another country and really talk about how this happened. Because this man was able to convince his neighbors and his stepson to torture and murder people for him. Not even strangers, people that they all knew in most cases.
which
You
blows my
know?
mind because I can't even kill a bug without feeling guilty about it.
Yeah, me either. But I mean, it can happen. And when people are in desperate enough, especially economic situations, they are a lot more susceptible to one guy writing in and being like, I can fix it. It's never one guy that can fix it. But when you're in the most desperate time of your life and you just want the pain to stop, that's how this happens a lot of times. Okay. And we're going to talk about the victims, the ones that we know about. Okay. Clinton Douglas Trezay was 20 and he was bludgeoned to death with a shovel in Bunting's living room in Salisbury, Australia, after being invited inside for a social visit on August 31st of 1992. Bunting accused him of being a pedophile, referred to him in conversations after his murder as Happy Pants. Tracy was found buried 2 years after his murder in a shallow grave on the 16th of August, 1994 at Lower Light, South Australia. In 1997, Tracy was the subject of 2 episodes of the Australian television show Australia's Most Wanted, which is a spinoff of the America's Most Wanted franchise. And Bunting watched the episode of the show with Jamie Velasquez and his mother and boasted, "That's my handiwork."
Wow.
And then he revealed to Velasquez that he had murdered Tracy while living at Waterloo Corner Road in Salisbury, and that he disposed of his body in Lower Light with Robert Wagner and Vanessa Lane. Robert Allen Peter Davies was 26, and he was an intellectually disabled man who in 1993 had a sexual relationship with Suzanne Allen, Bunting's ex-girlfriend. And as Suzanne's grandsons have kind of alleged that Davies had made sexual approaches towards them, the relationship came to an end. However, they remained friends, and just before he vanished, Davies was residing in like a van that was parked outside Suzanne's house. On December 26, 1995, his daughter, Annette Cannon, observed John Bunting and Allen, one of the perpetrators, clearing out Davies' van. Bunting later admitted to Jamie Velasquez that he had killed Davies on the 25th of December in 1995, so he killed him on Christmas Day. He recounted how Velasquez's own mother and his wife, Elizabeth Harvey, had stabbed Davies in the leg. So this is one of the murders that she for sure participated in. Just before their mutual friend Robert Wagner strangled him to unconsciousness with jumper cables. In court testimony, Jamie Velasquez stating that according to Bunting's story, Bunting and Wagner loaded Davies' unconscious body into the trunk of a Holden Torana, which I don't think is a car we can get in America. They drove 90 minutes to a different residence in the town of Baraka, South Australia, so they never dumped the bodies where they were living. They then tossed him into a bathtub and proceeded to bash him in the genitals with the end of a pole, which resulted in his death. So they beat him to death. On the 26th of May, 1999, the body of Davies was found in a grave filled in by Bunting and Wagner with bricks, soil, and concrete on a property previously occupied by John Bunting in Salisbury, South Australia. Security cameras caught Bunting accessing Davies' account at multiple banks on several occasions between January and April in 1999. So years after he was dead. So they were able to collect his checks and everything for at least a period of time. Suzanne Allen was one of the female victims, and she was found buried at Bunting's house at North Salisbury on the 23rd of May, 1999, wrapped in 11 different plastic bags. Her death was concealed by Bunting, and he continued to collect her pension, claiming a total of 17,000 Australian dollars. Bunting claimed she had died of a heart attack, although law enforcement suspected that she was murdered when the relationship with Bunting deteriorated. Murder charges regarding the death of Suzanne Allen were eventually dropped by the prosecutor due to lack of evidence of how she had died. And the perpetrators were tried, but not found guilty as a result of a hung jury. Her case was never tried again. Michelle Gardner was 19, and she was a transgender woman who lived in the residence of Nicole Nicole Zurita, a cousin of Robert Wagner's wife. Gardner presented as female, and Bunting referred to her as the biggest homo. Shortly before her disappearance in September of 1997, Gardner was playing with Wagner's children in her front yard. She grabbed one of the children and placed her hand over the child's mouth. Wagner saw the incident and became infuriated. Bunting and Wagner took Gardner to Murray Bridge in South Australia, where they strangled her in a shed. forcing her to stand up each time she collapsed. Wagner and Bunting then staged a robbery at her home, stealing some of Zarita's belongings and convincing her that Gardnier had stolen them in order to pay for a gender-affirming surgery. Her body was kept in a barrel in the shed until it was moved to the Snowtown Bank vault before it was found on the 20th of May in 1999. Her right ear was covered by a slip knot in a rope that was wrapped around her neck. Her left foot had been cut off so the drum's lid could be shut, and it was never found. Vanessa Lane was 42. She was Wagner's former partner. Lane, a transgendered woman, began a relationship with Wagner when the latter was 15 years old. So she was much older than him. They had been living together for 8 years. That's another thing. Robert Wagner was gay, like openly, which is another weird element to this. But we see that kind of stuff all the time with people who are involved in these far right movements and their discomfort with their own homosexuality. We see that a lot. They had been living together for 8 years when Lane and Wagner met Bunting when he moved to Salisbury North, because Wagner again was a neighbor of John Bunting. Bunting held open disdain for her, and he had previously and for Lane, because Lane had previously been convicted of child sex abuse, but nevertheless accepted her into the circle of friends because she kept him informed of the activities of other local pedophiles. Wagner ended the relationship with Lane in 1996, after which Thomas Eugenio Trevelyan, who is the next victim, with whom Lane had a concurrent relationship, moved in with Lane in April of 1997. So they didn't just kill her, they killed her live-in boyfriend as well. According to Lane, the killing of Trezise left her traumatized. She told her mother and Bunting's ex-girlfriend about the incident, and when they questioned Bunting about Lane's statements, he confirmed they were accurate. So this was not a secret. Anybody confronted him about murdering somebody, he would just tell them. And he still got away with it for 10 years almost.
It reminds me of Andre Chikatilo, like how the police knew that there was a serial killer in Russia, but they just didn't want to admit it to the public, um, because to them it was like a failing on their part, you know.
Oh,
And
they said that was a uniquely American thing and it couldn't happen in
yeah,
Russia.
yeah. So I just it just mirrors that a little bit in my brain.
Yep. Yep. Anything you want to say, Ben?
No, it's just one thing I've noticed though is the fear mongering around trans people. Like, just his assumption that this trans person, that she was up to no good because she put her finger across a child's mouth and was stealing money for hormone treatment. It baffles me. Like, I the rant I went on, I think it was our second episode, that people are so obsessed. It's like a fetish that people just can't get over. It boggles my mind, and they make an easy victim for people to pour that hatred to. Trans people do, and yeah, it's just the whole thing's sad.
Very. So on October 17th of 1997, Bunting, Wagner, and Trevelyan picked up Lane on the orders of Bunting. Lane called and verbally abused her mother, who could hear Trevelyan in the background, prompting her what to say. After telling her mother she was moving to Queensland and she wanted nothing further to do with her, they hung up. They then tortured Lane for information about her bank accounts, crushing her toe with pliers. Lane was then strangled to death. Bunting assumed control of Lane's vehicles and claimed all of her welfare payments. On the 20th of May, 1999, Lane's dismembered body was found by police in a barrel in the bank in Snowtown, along with the body of Gardner. Thomas Trevelyan, Lane's last partner, who was 18, had paranoid schizophrenia, which led him to believe that he was a soldier, so he always wore army fatigues. From April to October of 1997, Trevelyan lived with Lane for a total of 5 months. He helped Bunting and Wagner kill her. Just let that sink in. On November 4th, Wagner's girlfriend's son was playing with a dog when Trevelyan began chasing it in an attempt to kill the animal with his knife. He was stopped. Yeah. He was stopped, but that afternoon, Bunting told others that Trevelyan had started to go mental and would be a liability to them. Trevelyan was then driven on the 5th of November to Kersbrook in the Adelaide Hills by Bunting and Wagner. He was made to lean against a box and had a noose put over his neck. Trevelyan was discovered hanging from a tree in Humbug Scrub the following day. Given his history of prior suicide attempts, the coroner determined that Trevelyan had killed himself. It was not known until the trial what had actually happened.
Damn.
Gavin Allen Porter was Velasquez's friend. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, for which he had spent many years in institutions. Following the death of his mother, he moved to Adelaide from Victoria in 1997, where he met Jamie Velasquez and moved in with him. Both Velasquez and Porter were heroin addicts. After Bunting, Elizabeth Harvey and her children, including Velasquez, moved to Murray Bridge in late 1997, Porter also moved with them. Bunting referred to Porter as a waste who no longer deserved to live. Bunting was pricked by a used syringe Porter had left on the couch in his living room and decided he should be the next victim. Porter was sleeping in his parked automobile on Bunting's property when Bunting and Wagner attacked him. When Porter awoke, he managed to stab Bunting in the hand with a screwdriver before being overpowered and strangled. Porter's body was displayed to Velasquez before being put in a barrel for disposal. So they killed his roommate, showed it to him, and then put him in a barrel. Troy Yude was 21, and he was the half-brother of Jamie Velasquez. Velasquez had earlier confided in Bunting that Yude had sexually abused him when he was 13 years old. Bunting used this information to motivate Jamie to participate in this particular one. Bunting and Wagner woke Velasquez while he was sleeping in bed and told him that they were going to kill Troy Yude. They beat Yude while he was asleep in bed, and then Velasquez handcuffed him while the others tied him up. They dragged Troy Yude out of bed. They forced him into the bathroom where they beat him once more and demanded his financial information. Bunting used pliers to crush Yude's toes as he coaxed him to repeat the string of numbers, words, and sentences that he had recorded. They recorded all of this audio, by the way. In a lot of these torture sessions, they recorded audio. Yude was killed by being strangled. Bunting created messages from Yude and afterwards from subsequent victims to inform his friends that they would be going away using these recordings. He made them tell everybody in their life that they were going away, that they were going no contact, that they wanted nothing to do with them, and then he would torture and murder them and steal their money. Frederick Robert Brooks, 18, was the son of Jody Elliott, who was the sister of Hayden's wife. So as you can see, all of these people are people that know these people, with the exception of one or two of them. Bunting became obsessed with the notion that Brooks was touching up young girls and repeatedly told others that something had to happen to him, with no evidence. In September 1998, Brooks was notified that he had been accepted into the Australian Air Force Cadets and was invited to join Bunting, Wagner, and Velasquez at a party. Velasquez, Wagner, and Bunting tortured Brooks in a bathtub. As with previous victims, he was handcuffed and thumb cuffed. They inserted lit cigarettes into his ears and his nostrils. A lit sparkler was shoved up into his urethra. He was then made to speak into a recording device, divulging his banking information. A syringe was used to inject bleach into his testicles, which were wired to a battery, sending electrical impulses through his body. His toes were crushed by pliers before being choked to death on the gag. His body was found in one of the barrels in Snowtown. Gary
Oh,
O'Dwyer, yeah, go ahead.
no, it was just a lot. Sorry.
Yeah. Gary O'Dwyer was the neighbor of Bunting's and was both mentally and physically disabled. Are we seeing a pattern here? But yeah. Bunting repeatedly called O'Dwyer a FAG, which I am not going to say because I don't say that word. Bunting enlisted Velasquez's assistance in October of 1998 to learn pertinent details regarding O'Dwyer's financial situation and whether he had any family. O'Dwyer's income from disability benefits was regarded as a financial target. At the insistence of Bunting, Velasquez arranged with O'Dwyer for a couple of friends, Bunting, Wagner, and Velasquez, to have a drink with O'Dwyer on Francis Street in Murray Bridge. Bunting set out to get O'Dwyer drunk, and after approximately 15 to 20 minutes, Wagner grabbed O'Dwyer around the throat and proceeded their whole torture. And I've already detailed some of the stuff they did in those situations. I will only say it once. When I say it now, you can imagine the things that they're doing for several hours. O'Dwyer's body was taken to Hayden's home where it was placed in a barrel. On the 20th of October, 1999, his body was found in the bank vault. Elizabeth Hayden was Mark Hayden's wife and Frederick Brooks's aunt. Bunting was informed by Hayden that he had informed his wife about the murders. Bunting detested Elizabeth and warned Velasquez that she was an issue because she was aware of the killings. This is his mother, by the way. Wagner had similar feelings about Elizabeth, considering Hayden's wife to be a whore and a lowlife. On October 21st, 1998, Bunting and Wagner arrived at her residence. Her husband and children had gone out for the night. Elizabeth was dragged to her bathroom, tortured, and then killed. A rope left around her neck and a gag had been taped to her mouth. Purportedly later that day, when her husband was shown her remains, he laughed. Elizabeth's body was placed in the barrel and she was found later. David Johnson was 24 and he was Velasquez's stepbrother. Bunting did not like Johnson because he was fastidious with his cleanliness and appearance, and Bunting frequently referred to him as a yuppie and a FAGGOT, which I will not say. Bunting began talking about getting Johnson and suggested that Velasquez find a way to get him to the bank in Snowtown. On May 9th of 1999, which was only a little bit of time before the bodies were discovered, Velasquez told Johnson that there was a computer for sale cheap in Snowtown, and he agreed to go with Velasquez to buy it. He was overpowered as soon as he entered the building. Johnson was the only victim who actually died in Snowtown, and his body was found on May 20th of 1999. A piece of his flesh was fried and eaten by two of the people, so you can see the escalating stuff there.
Ooh,
They go from just strangling people and stealing their money to torture to eating people.
sounds about white.
Yep. So this was a lot for the police to investigate, and they really could only, they could only go by it was 1999. They could go by what people told them. They had limited DNA. They had enough forensics to identify people at that point, but we were nowhere near where we're at in the game right now. Like, familial DNA was not a thing. You had to have very, very perfect DNA samples. You couldn't get touch DNA. Like, if this case had happened today, we would have a lot more forensic information than we did in the 90s. And Australia was a little, like, this was a small town in Australia, so they were a little bit behind where the US was, and small towns in the US still are not very good about checking DNA. Ultimately, this was only figured out, caught, and found out because Jamie Velasquez turned state evidence. He talked. He told everything, including the things that he had done. And the only reason he did that was because At that point, he had been separated from Bunting, separated from his family, separated from those influences for about 6 to 8 months, and that's usually what it takes if you're in a very high coercive control environment for some of that programming to start breaking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
So, do you think after, I won't say anyone's name, but after someone passes away, do you think a third of the country in 8 to 10 months would start to awaken? What are your thoughts on that? Like, are you optimistic?
Well, I'm optimistic for some people, I'm not for others, and here's why. The sunk cost fallacy is very, very, very present with a lot of MAGA. A lot of MAGA will admit that they don't like some of the stuff he's doing, that they don't like this or they don't like that or they don't agree with it, but they will still support him. Okay. Um, I watch a lot of like leaving MAGA content. And again, this is a very extreme example of where these dynamics can go, but I picked something that was deliberately extreme to make a point because you don't just start killing people with your friends on a whim. Like that's that's not usually something that you can trust most people to engage in. And these people did it for years. And they weren't shy about it. Like they would tell people they were killing people and just nobody believed them.
That's the thing I have questions about because like that small of a town, and then people just, family and family members and friends just start disappearing, and nobody's asking any damn questions. Like, like I would.
People ask and they were threatened, they were told the truth, they were told they would be next, all kinds of things. These kind of dynamics work because they follow through on the threats. I
That
mean,
makes
if you found out that somebody was willing to torture their own stepbrother, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, so they don't have like a red line. They'll just do whatever to whomever that gets in their
right.
way, essentially. Which, yeah, that absolutely echoes what's going on now here in the United States, and it's just like when my question is when do people wake up and say, hey, this is enough, and I feel like I'm screaming at a brick wall most of the time because I live in Oklahoma and most people here vote down party lines. They don't do research. There are people, I will say, some people lately are starting to fight back about data centers and things like that, but by and large people are so ignorant here that I can go to a doctor's office and somebody checks me in for an appointment, and this has happened more than once. She has the old Confederate flag sitting on her desk, and nobody thinks twice about it. And you have people who are black and brown folks that are working in this office as well, and just like this is what our culture is. White supremacy is murdering people and hiding bodies and being actually really obvious about it and getting more obvious about it, obviously. And that's where I see where the comparisons lie as far as like, we're not even, they're not even trying to hide any of this shit really. And even though Trump gets on news and stuff like that and starts BSing about whatever, some people will believe him, but most human beings that in general, from what I've seen, just like on social media and stuff, people by and large do not believe anything that is going on is is real. They don't believe anything that he says. Everybody believes Mitch McConnell is dead. I feel like most people are aware of what's going on, but then you have that whole sect of people that would rather spend their lives being ostriches and not giving a shit because it's easier to be to shy away and it's that like hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil thing. Well, the evil still exists even though you're not paying attention to it particularly. Like it exists, but you're not going to say anything about it. You're just going to continue to just brush it to the side. It's like that whole thing about World War II and the Nazis. Like what you're doing right now is what you would be doing during Nazis imprisoning people in death camps and killing them. Like, because that's exactly what's happening right now. And I've tried to bring that up to people, and most people just look at me like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm gonna go to work now.
We are so conditioned away from reacting to things. Americans are hyper conditioned away from violence. We are hyper conditioned away from standing up for ourselves. We
Yep.
are hyper conditioned away from even protests, even though it is one of our most celebrated rights that we had or have. I mean, I think we had it, and I think a lot of people don't see any way out of this without hurting themselves. And
Yeah.
when you put somebody's survival, when you put a group's survival against, like, these people can survive, but you're going to have to do with less, and you're going to have to hurt yourself in some way to make sure that they can survive. People don't do that until like
No.
the very last minute.
No, because they don't think that it's going to have any bearing on their lives whatsoever. And it's like disability, for instance. The vast majority of people don't want, that's why they don't want to physically see disabled people, because we remind them of their own mortality and their fallibility. Like, like, you're not going to live forever. And if you live long enough, you're going to become one of us. I'm sorry, but like, I hate, it's like that old movie Freaks, one of us, one of,
Yep.
and it's going to happen. And the fact is people who are able-bodied right now aren't speaking out enough or standing up enough. It's just like white people who are able-bodied need to have their asses out in the streets fighting, because black people and brown people need to stay at home, because they're the ones that are getting most of this violence enacted on them. And yes, white people have died, but in the grand scheme of things, like, to me, it's like the fear of death. I'm not afraid to die. I've died a couple of times. It's not what people think. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but I'm not afraid to die. But I'd rather have lived my life doing something with meaning and fighting for the right things in whatever capacity I can manage. If I die doing that, then who cares? I'll be dead. I'm not going to give a shit. Like, I'll be dead. Like, I'm not going to care. I will have done something for a reason, but people are too scared of their own mortality and stuff like that. And I think that runs into why people are scared, because it's that scarcity mindset, that like lack mindset, where, well, if I don't go to work, if I call in today, I'm going to get fired. I used to be one of those people, never called in sick. But then I realized it doesn't matter how hard I work, that people that work less hard make more money and get promoted because I'm a doormat. And that's what capitalism teaches us how to be, for the most part. People that get promoted to management positions, I don't know if you guys have realized this, but in a lot of cases, they're people that are more easily manipulated and controlled than they are people that actually pay attention and work hard and try to do things like unionize coworkers, which I'm always that person. But anyway, I'll stop talking.
No, you are 100% correct in all of the parallels that you were seeing. Like, I picked probably the most extreme case that I could that shows these dynamics, and like the fact that they weren't hiding it. They were bragging about it in some cases. I mean, like, they had women in their lives that were participating in it with them, and then those women got murdered. Like, it's a very distinctive pattern, and it repeats, not necessarily in the same extreme ways, but the behaviors repeat over and over and over again in every coercive control group like that.
This sounds like patriarchal women, and those
Yep.
patriarchal women that uphold this shit. And then like that creator that, sings that song about the leopards eating their faces. They don't think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen to them. And it's the same thing with, like, for instance, people that I'm friends with who are queer folks. For instance, if you're white and you're queer, especially in my experience where I live in Oklahoma, the queer community is very diverse, but it's also very separated. If you're trans or non-binary, you are on the outskirts, like you are in a lot of instances. But here, and I don't know the dynamics in other states, because I haven't really gotten too much into queer communities in other places I've lived. But here, there are a lot of people who claim to be progressives. But if you're white and you're queer, a lot of them have a tendency to be very elitist, very ableist, and very racist. And a lot of people say, oh, well, Oklahomans have really friendly people, blah, 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 blah. I don't run into this. I don't. The thing is, if you don't experience racism, like, that's great. But if you ask a person as a white person, you're not going to see it unless you have some other white people come up to you thinking you're a safe white person. And my question to you is like, why do they think you're a safe white person? Why aren't you louder about why you are not a safe white person for them to be racist around? And I've run into that shit, God, almost every day, really, with the ableism and the racism and stuff. And people who claim to be progressive and claim to be the opposite of whatever they think MAGA is, when really those are the same people that got pissed off because I said I didn't want to vote for Kamala Harris. But anyway.
Yep, I know, I know, I know. You see it a lot in mutual aid communities too. A lot of people who have free Palestine in their bio, they claim that food is a human right. They say all the right things, and then they're the first ones to accuse somebody else of scamming because they didn't get their.
Yeah, and that shit pisses me off so much.
Yep. Jen and I do a lot of advocacy for mutual aid on different social networking platforms. Mutual aid is a means of survival for a lot of us. And my way of giving back to the community so that it is mutual aid and not just me taking from the community is that I boost a lot of requests on like a daily basis. The volume of stuff that I put out, if you follow my Threads profile or you see me on Blue Sky, like, is mostly trying to get help for people who are in just unbelievably harsh circumstances. One of the requests that came across my desk today was from a guy named Ethan who, had his disability cut, had his SNAP cut, and he's diabetic and can't get food. Like, and the sheer volume of people in trouble has increased about fourfold in 6 months.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Almost every post now is somebody needing help, and I get overwhelmed because it's like I try to repost everybody's stuff, but I get worn out just by being alive and awake, and so I feel bad because
Yeah.
I can't keep posting constantly. It is so tedious and it's so hard to keep up with everything, and I feel bad, but like we help as best we can. If people don't understand that's all we can do, then they can shove it, as far as I'm
Well,
concerned.
and because I am one of the only larger accounts, like I'm almost at 7K. If my follower count keeps going up the way it has been, I should be able to achieve that this week. I'm one of the only ones that consistently will repost. So people look at me like I'm some sort of leader, and it's not really that I'm a leader, it's just that I'm doing the work. They come to me and they're like, "Can you tell him to stop scamming? Can you do this? Can you make her give me that money?" No.
Yep, I've had people pull that shit on me, and I don't know if you remember, but that stuff with YM and a bunch of other folks, I got accused of abandoning of somebody that you still talk to that I don't. And it wasn't that I abandoned anyone, it was that I drew some boundaries and folks did not want to really care about those boundaries, and I got made real uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be a part of it. I wasn't going to get dragged into some shit when I was very ill at the time, and I don't have the energy to. I
Yeah.
can do what I can do, and I've had other people call me names and try to drag me on social media. Try it. Like, honestly, my mom is my biggest bully, so you can't hurt my feeling. I only have one left. Like, you can't hurt it. It's one single feeling. And I have an off-topic question for Ben.
Go ahead.
So Ben, your voice sounds really familiar, and I cannot explain why. But there's this thing on YouTube where it says it's like this aged great or something like that,
It
and
says
you
what?
remind me of. It's like this aged great. It's about these guys basically recap old movies from the '80s and how terrible they were. And your
He
voice
does
kind of
sound like
sounds.
that guy. He sounds like that guy.
Yeah, your voice sounds very similar to one of the guys on there, and they're not always great with some of the things that they say, but your voice just reminded me of that. And I was just like, why? His voice sounds like so familiar, and then I finally figured out what it what it was.
Well, if it's someone you like, then I can neither confirm nor deny it's me. If it's someone you dislike, I wholeheartedly deny any relationship to them, and that's purely happenstance.
Well, I don't know them personally, but they seem okay. I don't know their politics or I don't know how they treat servers or old people or kids. So like I can't really say whether or not I like them, but I
Well,
can't say that about you either. So
he's a very lefty, very gay stand-up comedian who says outrageous things a lot.
that's good. I like it. I like it a
The
lot.
other guy, right?
Yes, the other guy, dear.
Ben, are you not a stand-up comedian that's gay that does outrageous things?
No, not that I'm aware of, but I
Oh.
actually black out for like 8 hours a night if I'm lucky, 8 hours, and who knows what I do then.
Man, I wish I could sleep 8 hours. What's that like? Is it like, do you have really cool dreams? Like, what's that like?
I used to keep a dream journal, and honestly,
Nice.
this might be the most controversial thing I've said so far. Is dream journals are a bad idea on everything. Now, if you have a really cool dream, sure, write that down. But doing it on everything, I lost my ability to remember dreams well. I don't know why. It happened. Maybe it's just happenstance, but it happened when I started keeping a dream journal. I'll still remember the really, really awesome dreams, but I used to remember every dream before that, and then it stopped.
Do you smoke weed?
No, actually.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that could cause it. Certain medications can cause that. Like, all sorts of things can cause that. I had some really funky dreams.
Stress.
Yeah,
Stress can cause that.
Oh, that maybe
somebody once
that's it.
was like, somebody's like, I want to be inside your brain. I want to know how it works. And I was like, you would not come back the same person. You don't want to go in there. No, you do not want that. There's like Muppets playing music in one corner, and then like a carousel with clowns on it in the other corner.
Like,
There's dogs over here. Like, I don't know what's going on in my brain most of the time. It's just a lot of rambling and like machinery, and it's confusing for all parties involved. But at
do,
least I try to be entertaining a little bit.
do you know how gobsmacked I was when I found out that not everybody's brain is constantly going 24/7?
Yeah, it annoys me because, like, what are you telling me? Your brain is not a jukebox you can just turn on and hear a song play the only lyrics that your brain actually remembers from that song on repeat, on a loop, and sound like the radio on a loop. It's on a loop. It's always on a loop. Um,
Always.
yeah, and I'm like, the people are like, oh, I don't see images the way that you do. Like your poems and stuff have so many good images. I feel like I was there, and I was like, that's because I was there when I was writing it. Like I was literally in my brain in that moment, in that place, because I don't. I'm an alien. I'm telling you, I'm an alien. One day it's gonna come true, and the mothership's gonna come back and be like, your brother was right. Your brother was right. You are an alien, and you were adopted. So the mothership's coming. But yeah, I'm just weird. It's fine. Muppets. It's just Muppets.
Yep, I'm with you. I'm also on the Muppet train. My brain never shuts off. Like, even if I'm asleep, my brain is not shut off. Like,
Yeah, my partner
um,
keeps saying that I talk in my sleep, and he's like, I can't tell if you're awake half the time because sometimes you're trying to have a conversation. And I was like, just ask if I'm awake, and like I'll tell you.
the biggest reason that I picked Snowtown was because I see a lot of the power and control dynamics, maybe not playing out in the most extreme ways that they did there, right? But they're the same power and control dynamics that are being implemented at larger and smaller scales all across this country to get people to either be too afraid to do anything or not believe what they're hearing. No, that can't be right. No, there are checks and balances in place. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. That kind of
It's
thing.
illegal. That's
Yeah.
illegal,
Yeah, so is rape, but
right?
Speaking of which, E. Jean Carroll got paid today.
Hell yeah, good for her.
Yeah, good for
Good
her.
for her. Because why? Because the president is an adjudicated rapist, and I will never, ever, ever tire of being able to say that.
I just like I don't I feel like did CERN mess up the timelines? Because I just don't I don't understand. People are like, well, he's gonna release the Epstein files. Motherfucker's in the Epstein files, like he's the king of Epstein files, and y'all believed he was gonna release this stuff? Like, are you freaking kidding
So,
me?
did you see the Washington Post article from earlier in the week?
I don't think so.
Okay. They were able to prove that, like, the FBI had training videos on how to redact his name from things. They were explicitly told to cover up his involvement in everything, and whistleblowers are starting to come forward.
Good. It's about fucking time these people started talking. So sick of this crap.
Yep. So, what did you think of the case overall? Like what you heard, most of them are in jail. Jamie was granted parole, but he is not able to get out. Jamie has very much, after separating from the mother, the sexual abuse, the heroin addiction, the stepfather who got him to murder people, like being away from that environment has very much allowed him to develop into a much different person than he would be if he was on the outside. So has the years of therapy that were granted to him in jail. There is that. I do believe that rehabilitation is possible, even in cases that are deliberately extreme like this, because when you feel like your life is in danger and you feel like you have no other choice, and this is the only place and the only person that's ever listened to you, or the only place and the only people that you've ever belonged in, a lot of weird stuff happens. You know, we see it all the time here with people who, like the sons and daughters of cops who later go into law enforcement. The echoes of these kind of dynamics are literally all around us.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that incarceration in itself has so many problems. And I've worked with incarcerated individuals. I worked with some women for about 2 years, helping teach poetry writing workshops. And, most of those women were incarcerated because they got trafficked and they were abused from a very young age. And I 100% believe that had they been given the opportunity to be rehabilitated, given, therapy, things like that, it's proven that those types of programs for the most part work. And it's less likely for someone to reoffend if they are not only provided that rehabilitation, but also provided the means to reintegrate into society. Because a lot of times, like here, you're given a bus pass and like $100 or whatever, just like dropped off. They don't give people
Yep.
the ability or the opportunity to improve their lives. And now, like criminalizing homelessness, for instance, we had somebody get murdered here this week, and a homeless person murdered another other homeless person, beating him with I thought it was a brick, but apparently it was a cinder block. They beat the man to death, and his body was left on the side of the road for 12 hours. Middle of the day, and this is a neighborhood, mind you, that's been mostly gentrified, but it's also like our quote unquote Asian and arts district kind of vicinity. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of people go down there. It's like a hipster paradise practically. There is a coffee shop down there that I love. It is also around my old neighborhood, and I lived in there for a couple of years. And but the fact is that it's a very trafficked area, and the fact that the police didn't give two shits about this dead individual because he was homeless on the side of the road, just on the sidewalk, basically, just dead. His body lay there for 12 hours in the heat, and nobody did anything. And it's the cognitive dissonance side of it that I think that is really part of the major part of
Yep.
the problem. Because systemically, if we would take care of people's needs to begin with, a lot of the crime that exists would never have even existed to begin with. That goes back to white supremacy and capitalism and this need to control with time and money. And now, like our time, like our attention is a commodity. Our images are commodities. What we create is a commodity, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And, and all that commodification and cognitive dissonance and all that shit like gelled together creates such a really perfect storm for these crimes to take place. And the fact that, like, case that you brought up is a huge example of the fact that these men got away with this shit because the people around them thought what they were doing was the quote unquote right thing, when in reality it's like trying to be the good white person, right? Or saying, oh, I'm an ally to this and this and da 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 da. And I used to think that was the right way to go years ago. I very much grown up and gotten out of that type of mindset and stuff. But the thing of it is you can say whatever you want to say. You can say who you are. You can tell people who you are. But until you actually make moves that prove that you're an ally, that prove that you will stand up in the face of these things rather than be complicit in the harm that's being caused. It's just that mirror, really, that the mirror on society. And that case is a huge reflection of that. And the young man, Jesse, like, it seems like his experience is a reflection of that, because growing up in what he grew up in, like I said earlier, he didn't have a chance. And that is so true for so many of us who grew up in poverty, who grew up in abuse, who grew up, othered by society. And again, it goes back to those systemic issues, these problems that didn't even need to exist to begin with, and how ugly those things can turn out and become when really those problems could be easily solved. It didn't have to come to that.
Yep, that was kind of the whole point. Because if I'm going to make you guys listen to a grisly murder, and I'm going to make you listen to the things that people do to each other that I have to know about that most people don't, there's going to be a darn good reason. Like, I'm never going to bring up a crime case just to be like, look at how messed up this is. Because I don't see any point in that.
That seems like just the romanticization, the way that people are romanticizing serial killers. It's about like the rampant Ted Bundy documentaries and films they've made, stuff like that, and saying, oh well, he was such a smart guy. He wasn't that smart.
No,
Most
no,
of
he wasn't.
these guys are not that smart. They want to think that they're smart, but he wasn't. He was just around a lot of people that either just were dumbasses, like just weren't paying attention, or they didn't care. If you met the guy, like I saw pictures of this man, a video of this man. If I met that man, I would be creeped out by him. Like just
Yep.
something about him I would have been creeped out by. Not to say that my gauge for that is 100% all the time, but it's like having, like, I had a conversation with my mother about it, wrote some poems about it, about talking about serial killers and the ways that they use their choices to pick their victims and stuff. And I'm like, the most of the women that he targeted were women who were just not aware enough, not aware of their surroundings. And
Yep.
that lack of
Well,
awareness is what these people rely on
he
most of the
also
time.
looks brilliant because the cops fumbled the bag at every turn in the beginning of those
Absolutely.
investigations. Like,
Absolutely.
a lot of the serial killers that we think were brilliant and like got away with it for so long, like Green River, the Green River killer, like, had about a 75 IQ. Like, he was not an Einstein kind of guy. He got
No.
away with it because he was targeting sex workers, and
Yep.
up until the 90s, most sex worker murders in most cities were called in as homicide, no humans involved.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's the same thing as, like, who is the guy? He's a baker. I can't think of his name right now. You might know who I'm talking about. He was a baker. He owned his own plane, and
Robert
he
Hansen.
would,
Robert Hansen.
yeah, kidnap the women, take them to a cabin, and basically hunt them. And he just didn't think of them as human beings. And
Hmm.
that's the same thing with, like, again, go back to the government, how they view poor and disabled people, how they view Black people, how they view Hispanic folks. Like it's over and over and over again, and this cycle keeps fucking repeating itself. And it's like, I wonder when it's just gonna burn out. You know what I mean? I just wonder when that is gonna be enough. for people, because right now it should be, and I feel like it's not.
Yep. Unfortunately. Ben, we have been yapping your ear off. You got anything to say, hun?
I actually thought that was a really good point to end at, because cycle
Yep.
repeats and crazy always finds a way to end
Yep.
on a Jurassic Park reference.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. R.I.P. Sam.
Yep. Rest in peace, Sam Neill. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. This has been Party at the End of the World. Thanks for listening to this case with us. Feel free to interact in the comments if you notice any other patterns that are important like that, and we will interact with you. Other than that, everybody, you have a wonderful day, night, morning, whatever it is that you're doing when you're listening to this. Have the best one that you can.
Peace.
Bye.